An old man lives alone in a forgotten gas station, fixing trucks and never speaking unless asked. But when a fellow driver is wrongly accused of a serious crime, this quiet stranger reveals skills no trucker should have. Who is Dutch, and what is he hiding beneath the rust and silence? The desert was quiet, too quiet for Wesley Howard, who was used to the steady hum of tires on asphalt and the low rumble of his rig's engine beneath his seat. But now, all he could hear was the wind brushing through dry grass and the distant creak of an old highway sign. His truck had coughed, sputtered, and finally given up just as he'd passed a boarded-up gas station. He slammed the hood shut and sighed. No signal on his phone, just his luck. The old gas station loomed behind him, sun-bleached and forgotten. The signage was faded, the windows dark, but there was a light on inside, barely noticeable, but steady. Wesley hesitated, then grabbed his cap, locked the truck, and walked toward it. Inside, the air was still and dusty, and behind the counter stood a man. Thin frame, graying hair cropped short, weathered skin and tired eyes that said don't ask too many questions. "You live here?" Wesley asked, trying not to sound too surprised. The man didn't answer at first. He studied Wesley for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "Sort of. I'm Wesley. My truck's down just off the road. Think it's a fuel issue. Could use a hand if you know engines." Another pause. Then the man said, "I'm Dutch." That was it. No handshake, no small talk. Dutch walked outside without another word. Wesley followed. They reached the rig, and Dutch circled it slowly, crouching near the rear tank. His movements were precise, quiet, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He didn't ask questions, he just got to work. Over the next hour, he worked in silence. Wesley offered help, but Dutch only motioned for him to hand tools. Occasionally, he muttered instructions. "Wrench, tighten that line. Hold the light higher." No wasted breath. After a while, Dutch stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and nodded toward the cab. "Try it." Wesley climbed in and turned the key. The engine hesitated, then rumbled to life. Relief spread across his face. "That's incredible," he said, hopping down. "How'd you? I mean, that line looked fine to me." "Clogged injector. It's old. Easy to miss." Wesley looked at the man again. There was something oddly precise about him. The way he moved, the way he listened, the way he noticed things. Not like a mechanic, like something else. "Hey, can I pay you for this?" Dutch shook his head. "Come back in the morning. Needs more work to be road ready. You can stay in the shed out back. Got a cot and a fan." Wesley blinked. Seriously? I mean, if it's no trouble." Dutch was already walking back toward the station. The next morning, Wesley found him rebuilding a carburetor at a rusted workbench. He made 2 coffees, black, strong, nothing fancy. They drank in silence. "I used to stop at places like this when I was a kid," Wesley said, half laughing. "Back when gas was $1 a gallon and road maps were paper." Dutch gave the faintest smirk. "You get many drivers out here?" "Sometimes," Dutch said. "Most just pass by." Wesley studied him. The man wasn't unfriendly, just distant, like someone who'd packed up his past and thrown away the key. But even then, there was something calming about his presence. Solid, grounded. They spent the rest of the day working on the truck. Dutch never volunteered stories, but he listened when Wesley spoke. About his routes, his family back in Missouri, his dad who used to drive, his niece's birthday. Nothing dramatic, just life. That night, they sat on the porch of the old station, drinking soda under a sky full of stars. "You ever drive?" Wesley asked. Dutch stared at the horizon. "Different kind of road." Wesley nodded, not pressing. The engine was ready the next morning. Dutch handed over a small notebook with the steps he'd taken, written in neat, blocky handwriting. "This is really helpful," Wesley said. "Seriously, thanks. You didn't have to." Dutch just nodded. "Keep safe." Wesley climbed into the truck. Before turning the key, he paused. "You know, if you ever need a hand with anything, someone to haul parts or pick up supplies, I pass by here pretty often. Dutch didn't respond, just gave a single nod, eyes steady. As Wesley pulled onto the road, he glanced in the mirror. Dutch was already walking back toward the station, the wind tugging at his jacket, disappearing into the silence like he'd never been there at all. But something about that man stuck with him. The way he moved, the way he saw things others didn't. Wesley had a feeling their paths would cross again. And when they did, it wouldn't be about engines. The warehouse off Route 17 was buzzing with whispers. Forklifts idled, drivers kept their heads down, and the air felt heavy with suspicion. A shipment of high-end electronics, tablets, smartwatches, the kind that could vanish fast on the black market, had disappeared 2 nights ago. No signs of forced entry, no broken cameras. But the overnight logs pointed to one man, Milton Davies. Wesley had seen Milton around plenty of times. A quiet, respectful guy in his 40s, always kept his rig clean, helped the older drivers unload. Not much of a talker, but when he did speak, it was steady and measured. He wasn't flashy, wasn't the type to stir trouble. But now Milton was suspended, and everyone acted like that said it all. Wesley didn't buy it. He cornered a shift supervisor during lunch. Milton's been here longer than most. You really think he'd risk everything for a quick payout? The supervisor shrugged. The logs don't lie. Entry code was his, and his truck was the only one cleared in the time window. But that lock on the south gate's been janky for months, Wesley said. I've reported it twice. No one fixed it. Another shrug. Then maybe he knew that too. Wesley couldn't shake the feeling that the pieces didn't fit. That evening, after finishing his route, he turned his rig toward the old highway, toward the only person who'd noticed details others missed. Dutch was sitting out back when Wesley pulled up, fixing an old alternator by lamplight. Wesley stepped out and tossed him a 6-pack of ginger beer. You don't talk much, but you seem to listen better than most. Dutch raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. Wesley sat down beside him. You remember Milton? Asian guy, short hair, keeps a lucky coin on his dash? He's being blamed for a warehouse theft. Expensive cargo vanished. But it doesn't make sense. Dutch didn't answer right away. He reached for the ginger beer, cracked one open, and took a slow sip. What do you know about the layout? He asked finally. Wesley blinked. The warehouse? There's one main bay, 2 side gates. South gate's half broken. Cameras only cover the front and one corner of the lot. Dutch looked ahead, thinking. Tell me about the timeline, he said. Wesley explained what he'd heard. Milton's access code had been logged just after 2 a.m., and his truck was seen leaving around 2:30. But there were no witnesses, and the camera facing the dock door had been down for maintenance. Dutch's eyes narrowed. Too clean. Too easy. What do you mean? Dutch set the drink aside. If you wanted to frame someone, you'd plant a trail. Not a perfect one, just enough to point suspicion. Someone wanted Milton to take the fall. You sound like you've seen this before. Dutch didn't answer. The next afternoon, Dutch drove into town. With no announcement or explanation. Just showed up at the lot, walking slow, taking everything in. Wesley, catching sight of him, followed from a distance. Dutch approached the warehouse casually, like he was just another mechanic tagging along. But he wasn't here to make small talk. He walked the perimeter slowly, pausing at the south gate. The latch had fresh scrape marks, newer than the rest of the rusted frame. He crouched down, fingers brushing over the ground. Dust. Tracks. 2 tire prints. One from Milton's rig, the other narrower, mismatched. He followed them around to the west corner. There, near a dumpster, the gravel had been shifted, like someone had done a poor job sweeping away tracks. Dutch stood, eyes scanning the camera mounts. One of them, supposedly down for maintenance, had a new bolt, recently adjusted, as if someone had turned it deliberately to avoid seeing the side entrance. That night, back at the station, Dutch rolled out a map on the counter. Warehouse layout, gate positions, tire width comparisons. He marked it all carefully, then sat down across from Wesley. I used to read crime scenes like novels, he said quietly. Tire marks, dust patterns, camera angles. Details talk, if you listen long enough. Wesley leaned in, wide-eyed. You're not just some retired mechanic, are you? Dutch was silent for a long time. Then, I worked for the Bureau, FBI, 27 years. Organized crime, mostly. Smuggling rings. High-profile thefts. Wesley blinked. Wait, seriously? I left after a case went bad. The agency let a deal fall through. Cut corners. Ignored red flags. We lost the cargo. The suspect walked. I'd had enough. Wesley exhaled, stunned. So all this time, you've been hiding out? Not hiding. Just tired of pretending the system always worked. Wesley looked over the evidence Dutch had gathered. I think this is real. This could clear Milton. Dutch nodded. It's a start. They sat in silence for a moment. Two men from opposite ends of life, suddenly bound by the same thread. Justice. Wesley grinned. So what now, Agent Dutch? A faint smile tugged at Dutch's lips. We prove the truth. Quietly. The sun hung low over the desert hills, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement outside the gas station. Wesley leaned against his rig, sipping lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos. Dutch stood nearby, half bent over a dusty notebook spread across the hood of his old pickup, pen scribbling lines between towns, shipping routes, and warehouse locations like a man drawing battle plans on a war map. Why now? Wesley asked quietly. You could have stayed out of this. No one would have blamed you. Dutch didn't look up. Because now I can do something about it. Without anyone in a suit telling me to look the other way. He paused, then spoke. Not like a man unburdening himself, but like someone reciting a file he knew by heart. It was 3 years ago. An operation we'd worked on for 8 months. A suspected ring siphoning off federal surplus electronics, meds, gear, disguised as minor inventory losses. My team tracked a route through Arizona, marked a drop for interception. We had one shot. Wesley listened closely. Hours before the sting, someone leaked. Not a local, someone internal. The warehouse was empty. The truck never showed. We lost the whole shipment. No arrests, no trail. I knew who tipped them off, but they were protected. So I took the heat. And I walked away. Wesley let that sit for a while. So this case with Milton, it's familiar. Dutch nodded. Same type of cargo. Same setup. Too clean. Too convenient. He flipped a page in the notebook. We're not chasing shadows. This isn't random. These guys have a system. That night, the gas station turned into a war room. Dutch had pulled out an old laptop with missing keys and an improvised antenna. Wesley brought takeout and a willingness to learn. Dutch accessed the public GPS data first. These logs aren't protected. Every truck's ping gets registered every 10 seconds while on company time. He showed Wesley how to overlay routes using open-source mapping software. Now watch this. He clicked between layers. Milton's truck pings are inconsistent. His route is steady. Then one gap, right during the time of the alleged theft. Wesley leaned forward. So they're saying that's when he detoured to the warehouse. Exactly. But this, Dutch tapped the screen, is where the real pattern begins. He opened another dataset, a list of warehouse shipments, compiled through publicly filed bills of lading and inventory receipts. The anomaly isn't what was taken. It's what wasn't logged. 5 shipments in 3 months disappeared from different hubs. Each one logged as misdelivered and written off. And all linked to drivers who got quietly let go? Wesley guessed. Dutch gave him a small nod. No charges. No press. Just disappearances. Wesley exhaled. They're targeting drivers like Milton. Ones who won't fight back. Exactly. Low-profile guys. Clean records. Easy to scapegoat. Dutch placed a call later that evening. An encrypted connection routed through an app Wesley had never seen. A woman's voice answered. Calm, clipped, efficient. You're still breathing, huh? Dutch smiled faintly. Only just. I need access to interstate inventory logs for Aztec's freight. Last 3 quarters. There was a pause. That's a favor and a half. I wouldn't ask if it didn't matter. Another silence. You still running solo? Dutch glanced at Wesley. Not exactly. Check your inbox in 6 hours. Click. Wesley stared. Who was that? A friend. Or the closest thing I've got. By morning, Dutch had what he needed. The internal inventory sheets revealed inconsistencies, not just at the local warehouse, but across 2 other distribution centers. Always late-night shifts. Always inventory that could vanish without triggering alarms. Wesley traced the route connections on the map, marking them with colored pins. These 3 same crew rotates between them. Always 2 warehouse workers and 1 supervisor. Patterns don't lie, Dutch said. But it won't be enough to convince management. We need something more. He handed Wesley a USB stick. Tomorrow we drive to the drop point. I have a hunch. Wesley raised a brow. A hunch? Dutch's voice was quiet, but sharp. They're running the exact same playbook they did 3 years ago. And this time, I'm going to catch them in the act. Wesley looked down at the web of notes and maps across the counter, then back at Dutch. You're not just some guy who used to be good at this, he said. You're still good at this. Dutch shrugged. Let's hope that's enough. Outside, the desert wind picked up, tossing dust into the fading light. Inside, 2 men, one jaded by a broken system, the other discovering a deeper calling, sat shoulder to shoulder, not as strangers anymore, but as partners. Justice wasn't a badge. It was a decision, and they had just made it together. The plan came together on a Thursday afternoon, inside the dusty office of the long-abandoned gas station. Dutch spread warehouse printouts across the counter and circled a single line in red. Outgoing manifest, 9B04. Destination flagged as internal transfer. It looked official, but the crate number didn't exist. That was the bait. Wesley typed the phony manifest into the company's scheduling portal. Using a supervisor's login, Dutch had lifted from the breached logs. A priority load of brand new tablets, street value north of 70 grand, was now slated to leave the depot at 1:40 Saturday, under Milton's driver ID. Milton, of course, wouldn't be anywhere near a wheel. Dutch had already convinced him to spend that night at a motel 2 counties away, receipt in hand. If the thieves followed pattern, they'd hijack the crate, fudge the cameras, and pin the gap on Milton's code again. Saturday, 0:58. A warm desert wind carried grit across the depot's floodlit yard. Dutch and Wesley crouched inside an empty trailer parked opposite the loading dock, peering through a fist-sized hole Dutch had drilled. Wesley's heart hammered loud enough to drown the idle clank of chains. Dutch, by contrast, was still shoulders loose, breath even, notebook open on his knee, stopwatch running. 1:37. A forklift hummed into view, headlights off. 2 men in reflective vests rolled the decoy pallet onto a flatbed. Wesley recognized the foreman who'd sworn the Southgate camera was broken. A 3rd man, night shift security, scanned a badge at the side door, killing the alarm for 60 seconds. Exactly the move Dutch had predicted. When the crate was strapped down, the flatbed eased toward the weak corner of the fence. The panel slid aside, revealing fresh bolt cuts. Wesley's whisper threaded the darkness. That's it. They're taking the shortcut. Dutch clicked the stopwatch and dialed a number he'd memorized. A bureau tip line rerouted through a ghost server. No names, just coordinates, license plates, and the precise moment a stolen load was rolling off company property. He left the phone line open, microphone pinned against the trailer wall, broadcasting live sounds of the theft. 1:45. Red and blue strobes flickered down the frontage road, county deputies first, then 2 unmarked SUVs bearing state seal plates. The flatbed jerked to a halt. The thieves scattered but found spotlights waiting. Dutch watched through the hole, lips a thin line. Evidence secured, he muttered, snapping photos with an old Nikon for good measure. 1 minute later, he and Wesley stepped into the floodlights, notebooks raised. The deputy in charge, suspicious at first, needed only a glance at the airtight timeline, printouts, and live call log before nodding them through the cordon. By sunrise, Milton was reinstated. Warehouse managers stumbled over apologies, union reps promised back pay, and drivers traded rumors about a silent old mechanic who read footprints like scripture. Milton found Wesley near Bay 4, eyes glassy. "I don't know how you pulled this off," he said, voice cracking. "But you saved my name." Wesley pointed past the rigs to where Dutch stood alone, loading tools into his pickup. "Thank him. I just kept the coffee flowing." Milton approached, offered a tentative handshake. Dutch accepted with a small, reluctant smile. No applause, no press release. Just a man quietly returning what had been stolen. 2 evenings later, Wesley's backyard filled with the smell of mesquite and sizzling ribs. His sisters chased kids through the grass, and battery-powered lanterns swayed from the porch beams. Wesley had invited Dutch in a half-hopeful text. "Nothing fancy. Family cookout. 6 p.m. If you're free." No response. At 6:22, a dusty pickup rolled up the drive. Dutch emerged wearing a crisp white button-down that sat stiff on his wiry frame, hair combed, cheeks freshly shaved. In both hands he carried a lattice-topped apple pie, edges slightly uneven as if he'd practiced the crust more than once. Wesley met him at the gate. "Didn't know you baked." Dutch lifted one shoulder. "Followed a recipe." "Mostly." Milton arrived minutes later, lugging a cooler of sodas. Introductions were short. Soon Dutch was stationed by the grill, turning ribs with the same patience he'd used on engine bolts. Kids peppered him with questions about trucks. He answered in sentences that gradually stretched from 3 words to full anecdotes. Dry humor, a twinkle of surprise at his own enjoyment. Night settled, cicadas drummed, and conversation drifted to small victories. Cleared names, steady paychecks, routes that felt lighter than before. Dutch listened more than he spoke, but when Wesley's mother pressed a second slice of pie into his hand, he accepted without protest. Across the table, Milton raised a plastic cup. "To folks who do the right thing, even when nobody's watching." Glasses bumped. Dutch inclined his head, eyes reflecting the patio lights. Not a dramatic rebirth, not a movie ending. Just smoke, laughter, and the quiet click of a man rejoining the world on his own terms. He was simply present, and that was enough. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. Dutch didn't want redemption, but he earned it by doing the right thing when it mattered. What would you do if someone innocent needed your help? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, please leave it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey. See you in the next video.